It's Lil Baby.
That little thing where you like, little baby.
That's an added drop. I don't do that. We're good? 19, right? Amazing. Hi. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. I'm keeping all of that in. Welcome to episode 19 of Conversations with Chai. I am your host, Ihram Chowdhury, aka Lil Baby Ram Ram. Today, I'm super excited. I have with me, you might have seen him do all of his branding and marketing speech. You might have heard him behind the Brown Girl Mag interviews. I have with me Chirag, Nijjer. And winner of our, a lot of y'all couldn't move y'all audience, but she did it, right? We have winner of the Conversation with Chai fan vote. We have with me Riya Gohil.
Hi.
Hello, everyone. Yo, what's going on, guys?
Feeling good, yeah?
All right, let's just start nice and spicy. Chirag, tell us all what we're doing wrong on social media.
For starters, you're not putting me on the pit. No, no, actually, I think honestly, you're doing great. Honestly, like I think you have a ton of clips coming out. You have consistency coming out, right? I think it's a slow growth, but I think you were chatting about this right before when I was like walking in, where it's like some of your videos will pop off, and then you'll notice some people go back, right, and watch some of the older clips. Yeah. I think the production quality is pretty good, right? So like, there's nothing shaky around there. I think what you are going to notice is I think I was looking at your page before. There was one content, I forget, she's a psychologist, I believe, or a behavioral therapist.
Yeah.
I know her content's performed really well. If you notice, the key metric is shares, right? Or shares and saves, right? And like that kind of content, right? Where you're seeing people going, oh, wait, I kind of need this, right? Like this is useful. Mm-hmm. I think that content gets people in. They start watching, and then they start watching all the fun stuff that you have. I think most of your interviewees that you've had are amazing, all except DJ Umzo. I think he was okay. Right? So much love for you, baby.
Yeah. So let's talk about like the sharing aspect of it, right? Like let's talk about it in the sense of like what I do, right? And then also kind of what like Riya does, right? Because like in terms of like digital creation, like it's so hard to be like distinguishable and like the things, because you talked about that even like before you came up and did this, right? We were talking about like how do we make content like shareable, right? Like for me, I think it ends up being like what the guest says, right? Whether it's like spicy or whether it's like actual value add. But like for something like what like Riya does, right? Where it's like digital content influencership creation. How do we make that shareable?
Yeah. Well, I think Riya, on your side, you were doing your Christmas tree, and I think that video went really well.
Oh, Chirag did his research. Like this is how you know. He's like he's very good at this.
When he introduced himself to me, and I was telling him like what I do outside of content creation, he is the first person who's ever said to me, yeah, I saw your LinkedIn.
I aggressively LinkedIn stalk.
He's like, oh, yeah, I saw your LinkedIn header. And I was like, oh, okay.
I can tell whether we're going to be friends by looking at your LinkedIn, because I go straight for your skills. I see who's endorsed you. Communication, oh, great. She's endorsed by 7 people. We're good, right?
But like, you know what? Don't go look up my LinkedIn now. But like, it's like... You have to see who's really endorsing you, because nowadays it's just your friends. Like they just endorse you. And
why are you giving away my secrets? You don't all my endorsements.
Do y'all even think that matters though? Like like that level of like endorsement, and like do you think like an employer is actually like looking at that and being like, oh, like this person stamped this person, right?
I think, it comes back to that whole argument of like the shares, right? The content that you're making it always depends on the audience you're going for, right? And so like, depending on the audience so if you are going for the type of audience where like, World Star has a very specific audience type, right? Like they put up stuff that's going to make you go, oh, that's crazy. Like I've got to share, right? Thought-provoking stuff, not as much. They don't really perform as much, right? So that's why they're constantly sort of filling in stuff with like fights and stuff going in the middle, right? They have a very key audience. Meanwhile, you have like wealth pages on Instagram that do really well. And then the moment they post something a little bit different, suddenly the performance isn't going well. So I think one of the biggest mistakes creators tend to make is like they'll do this wide variety of stuff and then suddenly like you're lost, right? People aren't sharing it because it doesn't feel deep enough for them. Right?
Oh,
that's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that's the biggest thing. It's like nowadays content is not just putting out content. You want to create emotion and you want to create emotional value for your audience. Even as an influencer, like for 2024, I'm trying to pivot into how I can like make sure my audience knows my personality. Because one thing that really I've started to notice in myself too, like I'm not coming for anyone or anything, but it's like as an influencer, I love working with brands and endorsing brands, but the last thing you want for your brand is to become like a marketing, like I don't want to just like I love everything I endorse. I don't endorse it unless I genuinely like it, but I want more value. Like I don't want to just be like, hey, go buy this, go buy that.
Yo, and I think the biggest like indicator of that, right, and what you're saying is like people aren't actually able to move product because their brand is just like I've seen feeds. I'm not going to name names. I've seen feeds where it's just sponsored ad, sponsored ad, sponsored ad, and it's cool. You're getting the ads, but you're not actually getting any return ads, and you're not moving. Like, can you like back to what we were talking about on how you even got on this? Can you move your audience to do something, right?
Wait, can I get the background story here?
Because we were talking about like because Riya did like the fan vote, right? Okay. Riya did not have like the most followers on like out of all the people that were in the running to do this podcast, right? Yeah. Like she wasn't even like in the top 5 of like follower counts, but she was able to move her audience to do it, right? To come follow my page. Like it was a lot. We were talking about it. It was like a lot. Like, because you're getting people to click multiple buttons, click, take time out of their day to do that. I see people that have like 10,000 followers, but yo, when I tell them, yo, I'm gonna give you a code and go move something, they can't move a single thing. And like that, like to talk about it from like a business aspect, that's where you kind of like get pause, right? Because then it's like you might get a brand deal because you fooled one brand once. Well, like, oh, I got 15K followers. But then as soon as they cut you a check, they're not even cutting you a check. They're giving you a code and you're not able to move anything. That relationship is done. They just know that, oh, you're not actually worth the investment. Because I think a lot of people that are in the space that like Ria's in, they look at that as the win. Yeah. They look at it as like, oh, I got a brand deal, right? Those aren't real brand deals. You're getting a code that you're only getting paid off if somebody buys things. And I know based off of your engagement, nobody's buying anything.
Sorry, you were about to say something.
No, and I was going to say, and like when brands make that offer to you and they say like, you'll get 10% commission on whatever you sell, whoever uses your code, like they know what they're doing. They know they have nothing to lose.
It's absolute free advertising. You just made them the content, right? They're not paying a thing out of their marketing budget. It's only if you move something, right? Like it's contingent upon can you move something. Other than that, it's free content for them. They'll share and they get hyped when the brand be sharing them. I'm like, yeah, you just gave them free content. You didn't get paid for this.
Hurt you, man? Like
no.
What brand deal did you want?
It's not even.
Yo, he hired someone who then did it.
No, it's not for me. You know why? No. Like you like just like all jokes aside, it bothers me because like that's I think what stops like our culture from making like not that money is the bar, right? Making more money, but also moving culture forward, right? Because like we're so caught up in like looking like, oh, I got a brand deal, right? Bro, I don't want a 10% code from your company. Like I want you to write me a real check because I provide real value. Yeah. But we're all so caught up in these short, like, oh, I want a 10% and I want that. Like, Doug, that does not matter. That's like pure status games. Yeah. Like, oh, I got a brand deal from like Hermes, right? Bro, you did not get a brand deal from Hermes. You got a 10% code if somebody buys like a perfume or something, right? Like, and I think that stops us as a culture.
So what you're kind of talking about, right, from the marketing perspective is like having that base fee plus the commission on top, right? Do you find like brands, if you don't mind us asking, right? Like, do you find brands are they doing just commission-based stuff with you, or are you finding some brands are doing sort of the fee-based as well?
So when I initially started, like when I was smaller, like I did a lot of like the 10% commission thing, and I learned very quick. I was like, this is not amounting into anything. But obviously, like as a creator, you also have to like learn to, you know, when you're starting in any field, you do a lot of free work. You do a lot of like building relationships, putting yourself out there, and you understand that, okay, like I know I'm not making literally anything off of this, but it will pay off in the long run. And as a creator, you also have to ask yourself, okay, yeah, they're giving me 10%, but it's like, I do like their products. I do want to share this with my audience. Okay, so I'll do it. So I started pivoting inwards when it came to, do I want to work with this brand or not? Because it's like, I've had brands offer me like a lot of like money, but it's like sometimes I'm like, I don't support like what you guys stand for, or like the products aren't great quality. So I'm like, I don't want to do that. And it's like, because in this day and age, it's like, your integrity is kind of everything. The last thing I want is to put my name in front of something and then it's like it comes back to me.
So
like
when
they're like, oh,
so when I shit on those 10% deals, right? Like I'm not like shitting
By
on
the
like
way, use my Boohoo Men 15% code, right?
like when I shit on those like 10% deals, it's not me shitting on like, yo, you doing it, right?
Yeah.
It's more so like there's an opportunity cost to it. There's a cost to your brand if that's all you're doing, right? Because then your audience is like, oh, I'm never actually getting something here that's not an ad. I'm never getting any value from this for me. Like you're trying to take something before you've actually given anything to your audience, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of you're familiar with Emma Chamberlain, the creator?
Yeah.
Right. So are you familiar with like her coffee brand and everything?
Yeah.
Right. I feel like Emma was like one of those, and then for the audience as well, please cut me off from over explaining here. But Emma Chamberlain like kind of was one of the initial influencers that really popped off on this idea of like social media marketing as far as like selling products. Right. And a lot of that was like she would recommend stuff that she was already using in her videos, right? Her life day to day. And I think a lot of your content follows that style where you're not pushing people to like, hey, buy this thing that like some brand randomly reached out to me about, but more so like, hey, here are the things that I care about and I naturally use, and you have come to regard me as some authority figure, right? Like for example, if I'm looking for protein powder, right? Then I'm, instead of me having to look at like a million different protein powder options, I'm gonna look at the people like, oh, like so-and-so creator, I like follow them. I know that they like have been doing a lot of workout stuff and I know they're pretty honest and I know they really think about what they're doing. I'm gonna go and buy like the one that they're recommending. But I think it started off as that, and that's why it was so effective, right? But now it's moved into like pretty much people will try to get any deal that they possibly can. And it does hurt your credibility because eventually it's like, oh, this person just hawks any product that comes in front.
Bro, the deal that pisses me off the most is the Manscaped deal. Every single podcast.
Use my code Chirag 15. No,
no, every single podcaster has the Manscaped deal at the front of their podcast, right?
So I actually brought my man.
And it's like why would your audience care about that, right? Like again, like is your audience predominantly male? Sure, right? But like, why are you the spokesperson on Manscaped, right? Like,
there's an argument to be made, right? So there's the mere exposure effect, right? It's a psychological phenomenon that like the more we see something, the more likely we are to believe that it has value and that like we can trust it, right? So from a brand's perspective, it's like even if what they'll do is like awareness content. Are you familiar with like the AIDA marketing funnel? I don't know if you heard. So 4 stages, right? Everyone's going through awareness, interest, desire, action, right? And for a lot of these like brands, I think they see it as awareness content, right? It's like it's easy, like I can get my name out there for people, and then for the like that coming back to like knowing your audience. For the creators, it's also usually like it's the same thing. It's awareness content. Like I've worked with some creators who have taken deals like that, where it's like they won't take the fee, they'll take the percentage. Because what it does is it's awareness content for them to get on the radar of other brands that they eventually want to work with. The downside is that balance, right? Like doing it so that you know that like, oh, okay, cool. If I work with Coach today, Hermes might hit me up eventually because I'm on their radar. But in the process, am I losing the trust of my followers, which is what made me valuable in the first place.
But are you also losing the trust of other brands, right? Because if I come out here and I suggest XYZ product, right? That's absolute like dog shit, right? That turns me off as a platform to maybe an Hermes or a Gucci, right? Because it's like, oh, this doesn't fit our brand, right? Because then that's like the other risk. Like once you start taking like larger like money deals for whatever your platform is, right? It's like, yo, does this person align with our brand? Right? Because now we're stamping it a little bit, right? Like, why does Ihram have a whatever, like a Gucci ad at the top of his, right? Are they stamping that? Because somebody had to sign off on that.
So manifesting that for you, by the way.
Yo, Gucci. I may not wear it on the pod, but I could start. Like, no. No, but like I think that like when I like shit on like those deals, it's like never like, hey, like, yo, get your bag, right? But don't compromise your long-term bag or your long-term product for a very, very short-term check, right? Like, I've seen so many influencers like careers not die, but just taper off at where they're at because they've done the every single brand deal available to them at 10%, haven't made a lick, and they've compromised their entire audience trust.
Yeah, and that's why I think a lot of influencers who are successful are just doing what's natural to them. You know, like a lot of beauty influencers, you start off by whatever makeup you already have and what you regularly use. Like you do, like I was like that girl that's like, okay guys, like use this product. I was always trial testing things before it was a thing to trial test and post it on social media. So it's like that kind of stuff comes naturally, or like a fashion, like putting together outfits and things like that. Like if you do something that you're already passionate about and it's natural, then you don't feel like, oh, am I just doing this for the paycheck? Like, no, like, and that's also helps you draw boundaries with who you want to work with and what your overall vision is.
And it creates trust in the person, right? Because like, I think a lot of times like we look at things like our like Instagram pages or our platforms, right? And we're like, we look at it like a business, right? Because it is a business. But the trick of this all is to make it not feel like that for the end consumer, right? Yeah. Like they need to feel like, oh, I fuck with Riya the person, right? Or I fuck with Ihram the person. Like fuck the platform, right? Because like when I go eventually to move something to them, it can't be the like if they only fuck with like the platform, everything outside of that doesn't matter to them. Yeah. But if they fuck with me as like the person like behind the platform, it's like, okay, when I go to move something, I was telling Riya earlier, I'm watching like, my bad, we're like holding hands and shit on camera. I was telling Riya, I was watching like Dubai Bling. So it got me like really researching Huda, right? And Huda's story is like very similar to like what you're describing, right? Starts having like a fashion review or a makeup review blog, and then eventually builds such a trust because she is being completely honest where her audience is like, oh, no, we trust her makeup opinion. And then she's able to move a product and then build this huge billion-dollar empire, right, of what it is. But again, that only comes from the trust first, right? I think a lot of us like we take the paycheck early, and then we lose the trust, and that's again back to my original point. That's the part that gets me mad, right? It's like the short-term check for a very, very long-term sacrifice. Like none of us are ever gonna work for 5 years before we ever take a deal. Like none of us ever do that. So we never get to see the top of what this what the bag could be.
Well, the downside, it's like the typical thing of like when you enter a space that's been long, like has moved forward, right? So like, for example, there was like this study, a lot of African countries have completely skipped over the concept of paper checks, for example, right? The US system is still like obviously goes through paper checks and stuff, right? A lot of African countries are very comfortable using like technology as like a way, their phones as if they're banks, right? But they're also then a lot more susceptible to sort of frauds that are happening right there. And I think it's a similar thing here. For a lot of South Asian creators, it's like we're entering this space so late that it has already progressed way further from us, right? And so now we're just kind of like, we're not like there where we're like trying to get big, but we kind of take whatever's being handed to us at this point, right?
But
so I don't feel, I understand where the creators come from, is what I'm saying.
Yo, I understand, but that's the disservice.
Yeah.
Like that's
agree.
That's the disservice.
Like when was the last time you actually thought about, we tend to, right? In conversations, we tend to say, oh, I'm part of, I carry or represent my culture and my organization, right? But like, for example, I'll work with founders who, especially, I mean, you'll find this often in people of color, right? Especially as low-income individuals. So I grew up in a low-income family, right? And like, I'll work with low-income students of color, and they'll like come up with these amazing sort of ideas. You're like, oh, cool, like I'm gonna start this clothing brand. And then they'll be like, oh, we're gonna donate all our profits to a scholarship fund that's gonna help so-and-so, right? It's like, okay, but then how are you gonna grow the business, right? And it's like, they can't progress over this idea that I have to first, at least, I have to put the oxygen mask on my face first before I can help others. And oftentimes that's not a burden that is placed on other groups, right? This idea that I have to do whatever I do, I cannot do. It's very easy to start with a one-person team and grow really quickly and move forward. It's a lot difficult when you're saying I represent an entire community. So like, I see what you're saying. It's just,
but it doesn't have to be off the merit of community, right? Like it doesn't have to be off the merit of community. It can be off the merit of self, right? If let's just like plan this out, right? If I decide like, yo, like Ihram, like Conversations with Chai blows the fuck up, right? I prove that there's a real market, right? Yeah, my direct work, I'm not bringing up an entire community, but then people can say like, oh no, that's a real like socioeconomic group. That's like a real audience, right? Because that's what, like, again, like I always compare what we're trying to build inside, like us being South Asian, us trying to build, I always compare it to hip hop, right? Because like hip hop for a long period was not this mainstream billion-dollar industry that it was, right? It started off with, and they could have, and like hip hop and the early founders of hip hop could have said, oh, music is already saturated because there's so much music out there. No, they took the mainstream and added it to their culture, right? Like we could do that, but we're not, none of us, or not, let me not say none of us, because there's Anis out there, there's like Kahanis out there, like people are out there, right? Not enough of us are focusing on like really building something that like is relevant, like something that's relevant on a larger scale. Like I get really mad when I see like South Asian outlets, right? And they've just stopped trying. They've gotten a South Asian audience, but they haven't even captured the entire South Asian audience. They've just captured enough of it for them to be like, oh, I'm relevant.
Yeah.
But like for us to like really build to that degree, like for this to ever get like a Spotify deal, right?
Yeah.
Like I need to capture not just like a small percentage of the South Asian market. I need to get the majority of the South Asian market, and I need to have other people that just listen to because they're a fan of the space audience. They're like a fan of Riya or they're a fan of Chirag independently. And then they're like, okay, like I'm going to listen to this now because they're also on.
Yeah.
Like obviously, and I'm talking about us like progressed further.
Yeah.
And these things, of course, take time. And like the reasons I try to have these conversations now is because I see the outlook of again, mentioning the people that are really building, right? There's a top level to this that's going to be seen in 3 to 5 years. Right? Like I see like when you talk to an Ani about like what he's trying to build at Kolkata, right? If you talk to a Kahani about what he's trying to build with Indo, right? Like they're not like concerned with like, oh, I'm going to be relevant in the South Asian New York market. Or they're like, yo, no. We are going to be relevant everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think like, again, like we have such talented people in our fields, right? Like, bro, like I love like your content in the sense of like the value that it provides. But like we're not focused enough on like taking that game and being like, yo, like, let me apply this. I think more people like look at you and are like, oh, like this is cool that he's doing his thing, but they're not really like taking it. They don't even want to feel like, oh, I have to digest this.
Yeah.
They're more focused on like, oh, I want to be seen like him.
Yeah.
So you might see like replications of what you're doing or trying to do in that space earlier than you'll see somebody actually try to take that game and apply it to their business and stuff. Like we don't have that focus as like as a culture. Like there's individuals, right? But I would say like a majority of us need to get there for this to really develop into something.
I'll say that I think there's different players. All right, like similar how like there's like this academic study of like Schumpeterian, Kisnerian. There's like different types of entrepreneurs, right? There are those that are right at the edge of like they're pushing things forward, right? And they're like the Jeff Bezos or whatever, right? There's those that are just taking the stuff that's already been created and then kind of like building something from it because the ones that were at the edge made that available, right? Think iPhone and stuff, right? iPhone came together from tech that had already been built years in advance, right? But it was others' hard work that allowed them to then have access. And then you have like mom and pop shops, right? And each one of them play a role, right? I think when the stuff that I talk, I mean, even the stuff I'm saying to you, right? I joke about it with my friends all the time, right? Is like, I'm sure sitting and talking to me gets a bit exhausting because like, okay, cool. Everything turns into, oh, do you guys know the story behind this? But like what I found oftentimes is it takes time for people to realize that the thinking process of what they're doing is like, they're no longer just creating videos. They're creating consumable content that's supposed to drive action. Right. So the moment it takes people a while to understand that things are never as simple as they seem, that there's a deeper picture. And often that's like insecurity from themselves, right? Like I'll talk to creators who have like these massive, like millions of followers. I'm like, cool, like what's the funnel that you've set up? Right. And what you've done, he's like, oh yeah, I'm not really, I don't think I'm ready for like a real business type thing. And it's like, oh, you are a business and you have impact and you are doing, and you are expected to have a voice, right? Yeah. But I'll ask Riya, like what's your thought process, right? You're a creator who's obviously monetizing, but also traveling right now, right? Like you're giving people a glimpse. Like I look at your content and I'm going like, oh, cool, that's someone traveling. I barely ever get to travel. Yeah. So I live vicariously through you. But at the same time, I'm going, oh, cool. On your story, you posted XYZ thing. Let me save that. Cool. Because I think Riya is a cool traveler. That means I might like this as well. But what's that sort of thought process for you?
Well, like, honestly, like, to be honest, like when you're a content creator, like I haven't traveled that much. It's just like, if you plan your trips correctly, you can put out content like that. But I think the thought process kind of has to be going back to what you said. It's like, what is your overall picture? What do you want to create for yourself? And it blows my mind when people have like such big followings, but they don't know what to do with it. It's like, have you thought ahead? Okay, like, do you just want to be putting out content, or do you want it? What's your overall message to everyone? It's like
purpose.
Yeah, like what's your
what is the purpose?
Like,
bro,
what is the
me and my therapist spend way too much money figuring.
No,
it
what is
out.
no, not. But like, what is the purpose of these business? No, I get it, right? Like why do you want to like I'm gonna ask. Like I'm sure you see so many people. Why do you want to be like an influencer or like?
I'll tell you why. Because growing up as, and you know, and not in a cliche way, but I feel like every brown girl says this. Growing up as a brown girl in this day and age, it's such a confusing environment to be in, because you have all these societal expectations that come from your culture and your background and your family, but you're also in a city or a country where it's like they're not really relevant. Like the way you dress, the things you do, the kind of people you date, where you go out, like how you would move in America, Canada, whatever. It's not how you would have moved back in the village, like in India or whatever. And it's like you're constantly battling these two things. And in the same time, you're trying to make everyone happy, but you're also you never really stop to ask, okay, what do I want to do? How do I want to dress?
Yeah.
Do I want to go on solo trips? Do I want to go on girls trips? Like, and I feel like I'm finally at a place in my life where I've reflected and I'm figuring those things out. And I don't want other younger brown girls to get lost in that thought process. Like, I want them to know, okay, there's like someone who's balancing both worlds. She's like finding a way to like have a healthy relationship with her family members, but not compromising who she is.
Yeah.
Like, and like it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's like drawing those boundaries as like a brown girl with your family, like letting them know that, hey, look, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And I need you guys to have faith and trust in me, that you've raised me well enough to know that I'm not going to do anything that's like compromising anyone's ethics, but I'm still gonna express myself. I'm still gonna like, my fashion's gonna like, I'm gonna drip down, and it's like
I'm still gonna do me.
Personal to like any of you guys.
Yeah.
Well, but it's cool. Like you've crossed a threshold, right? Where you no longer view what you're doing as just a way to be able to like put money, like put videos out there, right?
Yeah.
Same how you don't see this as just an excuse to sit with people. Most people have not crossed that threshold. Most people don't see what they're doing as bigger than just themselves. But like you said, like, brown girls say this all the time, right? Yeah. I think we've only really seen that happen because other brown women have seen other brown women also finally get the chance to say this stuff out loud. Yeah. You're like, oh, I go through the same thing, right? So it's like, but like you are bigger. Your video about like, oh, here's my haul that I did from like whatever brand you did it from is no longer that. It's no longer just you buying clothes and putting them on. The moment the camera was off, sure. The moment the camera turns on, it is now empowering people. It is now helping people who have the same body type to feel like, oh, cool, like I could wear that. Or if people who have the same background be like, oh, shoot, like I never thought I could do that, right?
Yeah. That and again, that's what you're describing. And like back to like how you make this real shareable content and like what's like the real game here, right? Is no matter what level of like business that you're at or platform that you're at, you always have to think of it as bigger than yourself or bigger than what it is. Like the purpose, because your audience is only going to be as big as that purpose is. If the purpose
someone put that on a shirt now,
if the purpose is I just want to be seen, bro, everybody can pod, right? Anybody could pull up a mic and just talk, right?
Yeah.
But if it's just like, oh, I want to say my opinion and it's not something about bigger than yourself, who gives a fuck? You're gonna find 5 people that are entertained, like, oh, look at what this asshole's saying, right? But the purpose has to be bigger than that. Right. And that's like where I get like, this is where I get like angry. Right. Yeah. And this is where I sound like an asshole and I sound like a hater. Right. Yeah. When I see like I'm all for, I need the space. I need the South Asian podcast space to be bigger. I need the South Asian media space to be bigger. I need all of y'all, Chirag, Riya, I need all of y'all to be bigger. Because
I'm already gaining way too much weight, bro. I can't be any bigger than this. Mama gonna be mad.
No, look, when I say I need all of this to be bigger, because I need the space for me to think about this the way that I think about it, I need everybody to participate and I need it to be at a certain level, right? Yeah. So like with that, that only comes from people thinking that, hey, this is bigger than just me.
Yeah.
Right? Like this is bigger than just me. And my challenge to you, right? Like you're obviously in like the South Asian media space and I'm sure that you're having these conversations. And this is like something that I like wish I could get this like message out. If you're like a South Asian media platform, I need our South Asian media platforms to be able to break people.
Yeah.
Like break people, right? Like I need them to be able to be like, yo, this person's super fly.
Yeah.
Like let me get additional eyes on it.
Yeah.
Because that was the original how do you call it? That was like the original process of how you got up as an artist or got up as a creator. That's why people used to do Jimmy Kimmel or people used to do Breakfast Club, right? It's like, yo, I need additional eyes on this. And those platforms were able to provide it, right? We have so many fly South Asian creators, South Asian like branding folks.
I'm confused what I'm doing too. So don't worry. Hardest question anyone ever asked. What do you do, bro?
I won't lie. Like I spend like 5 minutes before in pre-production, like trying to figure out like how I'm going to introduce everybody. And with Chirag, I was like, what do I say?
Oh, bro,
like branding speaker, works at Brown.
My favorite DM to this day, someone reached out and was like, this is someone I look up to, right? So this is someone who like I'm a huge fan of, right? And they're pretty well known. They reach out and they're like, yo, I really, I love the stuff you're doing, right? Like I'm really into it. I want to plug in, but I got to be honest with you. I spent the last 20 minutes going through your page. I have no idea what you're actually doing though, right? Like
you're
doing
a million different,
but that's what I love
they
about
do a lot
our
of things.
community.
Yeah.
No one, like everyone in the South Asian creative community is not just doing one thing. Like we have so many different facets going on.
Yeah,
like,
I think it's always funny for us to hear the other person. Like when you say that you have like a full-time job, like obviously I know you have a full-time job.
It's kind of like every time I tell someone, oh, like I'm an associate project manager for like a tech company, they're like, oh, I would have never guessed that. And I'm like, why? Like why? And then they get quiet.
But I think that's so fly, right? That we're able to do both. But like I think that, and we've proven that in the way that we've approached like the other things in our life, Google, product manager, right? Like we've applied those things in other spaces, right? Like we've achieved a certain like thing within corporate. I'm saying if we took this part, the creative part, with just as much seriousness or even a shred of that seriousness, but none of us are willing to really do that. Not none of us. Very few of us.
There's a Dost
means friend.
Dost means friend.
Sajid,
yeah. So, yo, I think what he's doing is like
super fly.
He's an example. Yeah,
he's finding the South Asian like musicians, right, and giving them a platform. But the thing is like it doesn't work if it's just like the one, because he as a platform is not big enough to go push those, right? Eventually we'll grow to that, right? This as a platform is not big enough currently to go do that. But that's like when I think about like real goals, like that's really what it is. I want to be able to say like, hey, this is going on within our community. These are the storylines behind it, right? And have people plug in and care. Like, oh, like Riya just got this brand deal from XYZ place, right? Like it's huge. Right, like if you get like, I think if
manifesting that, for
I think
right now, let's go.
I think if somebody from our community, like I think, I'm gonna just shout him out, like Shaminder, bro. Fly ass model, right? Does Hermes, does Tommy Hilfiger, man, so full turban, right? Killing the model runway show, and I'm like, yo, people like our community would care about that.
Yeah.
Nobody, like, you know what I'm saying? And I wish that this platform was big enough where I could say his name and be like, yo, go Clock Boy, because he's really working, right? And I think that's like the coolest thing, and that's like I would say my challenge, like my personal challenge, Can I get the camera right here? This is my personal challenge to like my brown girl bags, my pop shifts, my urban Indian, like urbanindian.com, Urban Asia, right? Like my challenge to them is we need to be building these platforms even bigger. Like I look so hard up to like Pop Shift. I look so hard up to Brown Girl Mag for what they've built, right? But I'm like, yo, that is not the top. Like that's not the top yet, right? Because I think the space, as the space gets bigger, these platforms will also get bigger, and that comes with like a lot of responsibility on who we bring up, right? As a culture, as a community, right? Like we've broken South Asian artists, we've broken like a Hassan, we've broken like a Huda, right? Like there's so many like brown folks that are winning, and it comes from people that usually, to a degree, like look like them, right? Like I'm sure most of your followers are probably,
they're like, it's so sweet because I see so many like brown girls following me, and it makes me happy because it's like it really shows you that it's like we're finally reaching that phase where a lot of us are finally brave enough to be like, okay, we're actually going to pursue this, and it can turn into something without carrying judgments or any sort of fear of like the unknown. Like, and that's like says a lot because that means that there's such a long way to go. Exactly what you said. Like, this is just the beginning.
And like deeper, I don't know if you've like reflect on it. Deeper than that is that these like younger brown girls are looking at you like they probably have those same dreams and desires, and they're all like, oh, she's like doing it. Like whatever level, like, you know, she's doing it, right? And I want that for myself. And of course, like the inner part of us all to see people that like look like us. Like think about it. When we were growing up, seeing somebody brown inside like a Hollywood movie.
Yo, Disney Channel had any of those episodes?
I followed like every brown girl who started influencing like back in the day before I was even scared to make my Instagram like public. Like I used to follow every brown girl who was like brave enough to do it. I was like, yes, good for her. I'm too scared because my family might see my profile, but I'm gonna support you.
Right? Because you see that, right? Like you see the people. Like I'm all like, yo, I think like the flyest thing to me, right, is like somebody like an Anik, bro. Like, bro, Bengali from Queens. I'm all like, bro, this dude is like meeting with he has a Spotify billboard in like Queens, right? Like that's crazy to me. Right? I'm like, yo, like thinking about like how a 15-year-old or a 13-year-old me would have received that to see a rap. Because, you know, somebody who's interested in like hip hop, I'm like, oh, that's like the flyest thing in the world, right? But now we're part of like the generation that like, oh, like people, some of us are doing it.
Well, it's weird. Well, one, I will say about Anik, I heard his song "Big Facts," right? Made me think I could start rapping. That was probably the shortest rap career.
Bro.
I went downstairs. I told my mom 3 raps. She said, "Beta, get the hell out of my face. That's not happening, right?"
Your rap? Wait.
But I like there's this mentality, right? I think that there's tiers to this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I think it does happen. Like you have all these people who are doing this phenomenal stuff outside of, like you create these pockets, right? Like there's this I don't know what to call it, but almost like the New York City or / New Jersey / everyone that ever went to Rutgers. So like 80% of the South Asian people here. But like that whole group has like become this little pocket, right? And then you go out to like California, there's that entire pocket of like brown influencers and content creators out there as well. And then eventually you're like, okay, cool, you can do a bunch of stuff in that space. And eventually it's like you see people almost in a way graduate, as sad as that sounds, right? Who then move into like into a lot more wider spaces, to be very frank, or like more powerful spaces. But you see, one thing, not to, defend anyone or any specific, right? But for example, like with Brown Girl, you do see like a pushing into like some outside, not even just South Asian, like sort of movies and stuff, but ones that have South Asian sort of like actors in them, but like predominantly white movies, right? And you start seeing this larger Hollywood beyond just like, oh, it's like eventually we graduate away from the Disney Channel one episode is all about Bollywood songs to like eventually there being actual brown characters and brown like actors on there. But I think to your point is like it takes time. The thing I'm scared of is what I often deal with the most with people when I'm working with them is not a lack of options. It's an overabundance of them. And then what it creates is this analysis paralysis, right? It's like when you walk in with this, if the mission that you've created for yourself with this podcast is that I'm going to lift brown culture, you are one person coming into a battle that, brother, has been fought like generations before you, right? There are an entire like organizations and societies trying to fight for that same thing, right? I think you find a small subset and you tackle it, right? Like, so you're saying something like, I want to be, like you just said, I wish my podcast was at a level that I could tell you, go follow that one guy and it'll move, right? Pick 3 creators. Dude, your following is already big. You have what? Like, what are you guys at right now? 900 on, you're about to crash. Bro, if I got 900 people in this room right now, 900 for like one of those South Asian artists or anyone, right? In a room, 900 people show up. I had one talk that got maybe like close. I think it was like 600. And I was sitting there shaking the entire time like, oh, this is the greatest.
We forget that they're real people.
They're real people. But
you
got pick 4 creators.
But that's kind of what's happening.
Yeah.
That's kind of what's happening, right? Like that's kind of the goal of this, right? Even currently, right? Because I see potential in the people. Like I don't have to go like interview. Like obviously I would love to interview a Hassan. So, Hassan.
Yeah.
But
he responded to one of your comments, I think, as well.
He did, right? He did, right? But like the thing is like, sure. That, and hopefully that'll come, right? But I'm also more concerned with seeing these people like that are my peers build in this space, right? When I have anybody up here, it's like give them a platform, let them talk and get their personality off, right? But it's also, let's track this person.
Yeah.
Let's track what this person does for the next 3-5 years, right? Like, Chirag, like you're not gonna stop. Like you're not gonna stop. Like you're gonna continue. You're gonna continue to build. You're gonna continue to build.
Thank you.
Right? Like you're not gonna stop. You're gonna continue to like build. Right? So it's like to see all of the people in those spaces and what they build to. Right? Like it's like it was crazy. Like me and Ashna had a conversation before this pod.
Yeah.
During the pod, and then she said something. 2 months later, she executes on that thing. I'm not gonna say it because I don't know if it's like released out, right? But she goes and executes on that thing, and I'm all like, oh shit! But now somebody can listen to the first bit or watch you, and that's like the creator journey, right? Yeah. We see somebody at the start, right? Yeah. Like, and then we get to see like what they become, right? Yeah. Like again, like what Hassan is now to the culture, was not what Hassan was like 10 years ago. No. He was the one guy at the Daily Show, like the one brown guy, right? And we was hype about that. And now, but I want to come back to the conversation that you had about pockets. Yeah. So I agree 1,000% with what you're saying. There is a section of us that will graduate to mainstream culture. Yeah. But I will say that they're like, again, back to like tracking hip hop. Even hip hop started off like very regionally. So when we mention these like South Asian pockets, what you're describing are real South Asian markets, right? There's an LA South Asian market. Yeah. There's a Toronto South Asian market. There's a New York South Asian market. And honestly, some of them do cross over. Like Fateh, obviously based out of Toronto.
Oh, man.
Don't
stop. I got a lot of FOMO, man.
Fateh based out of Toronto did a New York show. Yeah. So there's clearly some cross.
Yeah.
Anik tours, right? Like he's part of the New York market, but he tours. So we're starting to see these audiences jump over. But thought exercise. What happens when all of those, like hip hop started off regional? It used to matter, like, oh, Nas came out of New York, right? Like Snoop came out of LA, right? And like those subsections only listen to those folks. But what happens when that culture is a little bit more interconnected? You get what hip hop is today.
I'm so ready. I can't wait to start beef, yo. West Coast, East Coast, bro. New York, South Asian creators versus like LA, yo.
We joke around about it, and that's the unfortunate part. Like that's like the usually like how these things like blow up into more national things, because you need both sides of it caring about both artists, right, or both creators, right? Like you need people like Asha's obviously like super relevant in general, but she's also super relevant in New York, South Asian culture, right? Like obviously she's relevant like across, right? Like Anik is obviously relevant across, but he's super relevant to New York, South Asian culture, right? And I think like once we start seeing
sort of
more of those crossovers, and that's why like my challenge is always to like platforms, right? Because we're the ones that would connect, right? Like there's no reason for Riya from wherever she's from to build outside into another spot unless it's like, hey, come here and meet some people from New York. Like that's where I think the platforms, and that's where like, again, like it's not just platforms, right? Somebody like Pankti, right? Like with like a Masala mixtape. It's like, okay, like I'm throwing a South Asian music event, and it's not just for South Asians within New York, right? Like I'm getting people to fly in to do this show. Like I'm still at the time like lived in LA, did Masala mixtape, right?
No, literally after that, Umzo and AJ, right? We ended up being friends. We started chatting and stuff. And it was like that creation only happened because like someone randomly decided, oh yeah, we're gonna bring them together, and I happen to be in those spaces. Like I think what you often find is you need to create the space. People make the connections within the spaces themselves. Right. And we don't have enough space creators, at least. But it's exhausting.
It's not just space creation. It's also like the mindset that we take as like creators, right? Like we should all want to collaborate, right? Like I think like it's like a weird thing when like why wouldn't you? Like you want to pool those resources and like combine those resources. Now, no matter how many people listen to this episode, right? Maybe a lot of people are probably following you that have never heard of Riya, and vice versa. Why wouldn't we exchange that? But now somebody that was like listening or watching because of Riya gets to be like, yo, this guy's talking some smart stuff, right? Like, let me go check him out.
Followers,
follow him, right? Like, let me just track that. But that's how that actually grows. I think something I've noticed in the South Asian space, there's a little bit of a
hesitancy.
Do you don't feel that there's like some level of like oh, if she win I can't win, or if this pod blow up, like we can't blow up, right?
Yeah, but I think that also largely comes from the South Asian background itself. Like it's not just like our generation or whatever. It's like, you know, like this is something, because I work with a South Asian therapist and we talk about this a lot. It's like how in our community we're often holding ourselves back because we don't support each other, even especially like South Asian women, like we like aren't advocating for one another, like, and things like that. And it's like, it's really disheartening and something that I'm really proud of this generation because we're finally growing out of it. But like, obviously we still have a long way to go.
We still have such a long way to go. Like, yo, hey, if you're a podcast and you just you don't follow the page, but you watch everything, just follow. I want to support y'all too. Like, I don't look at any of this as competition. It really, like when people think I just like say that, right? Like I really don't. Like I want all us. I think there's enough for all of us to eat if we work together, right? It's like worse if we're each of these diverted markets, right? Like where it's like, oh, because I listen to this South Asian podcast, I'm not going to listen to Ihram South Asian podcast. That's a disservice to both, right? Because if enough people think like that, our audience is only going to be so big.
There's someone much smarter than me was explaining this once. I think
that must be a short list, right? Like, for you to, I gotta hear the list of people that Chirag thinks are smarter than him, bro. Like,
yo, someone clip that, send that to me. My ego is up now. No. But it's they were saying that part of it stems from this idea that if you've grown up always thinking that there's only one seat at that big table, then you view everyone else who has the opportunity to get to that table as competition, even if you don't like. And we often, I mean, unless you're doing something really weird in life, we often don't have arch nemesis, right? We don't have people who are actively trying to hurt us, right? We have people who are trying to do the best that they can to get to that seat themselves. and in the process may end up hurting us in the way, right? So I think it's not necessarily that people don't want to collaborate, right? I mean, sure, people want to, but I think it's a downside of like, hey, like, okay, if we collaborate, the bigger we get, it's going to be this pyramid effect, right? And like, there's only going to be, or like you see this with acting all the time, right? The one brown, sorry, I'm just coming off of like having worked with a couple actors, and so it's like I'm in that zone right now. But it's like, if there was only one brown character in a play or in a movie, right? Everyone else in that room, regardless of how close you want to be and how great they are, is now competition, right? And then slowly now you're starting to see that there's like, if there's only one podcast, now people are starting to see, oh wait, I can actually start my own podcast. I can do this. There are multiple podcasts, right? There are, again, that idea of space. When we start seeing that there's more chairs, then you're like, oh wait, I can get to that chair, but at the same time, I'm a brand ambassador for this, and I'm not the only brown brand ambassador. There's space for more. I can bring you along, which we're starting to see now.
Yeah.
But again, generations, right? It's like slowly this, and I think you do yourself a disservice when you're like, you're doing that right now, right? Being able to walk around and say, oh yeah, like I was on a podcast, check out my podcast episode. That is, the fact that is more accessible and helps me build more credibility is something that like I would have dreamt of a couple years ago, right?
But this is where I get like not annoyed, but this is where I get like kind of a little bit disheartened, right? Because I think that you should look at it as that opportunity. Like all of us should, right? Like I think when somebody like asks, like I look at it as like, why wouldn't I want to, like if I could, I would have everybody on this podcast. So I could just like, but that's just like, you know, like scarcity of like resources in that sense for my bandwidth, like all of that. Because like, why wouldn't I want for all of us, like why wouldn't I want Chirag's eyes to look at mine, right? And then Ria's eyes to like look at mine, right? Like and it helps.
You say our eyes to look at you.
No,
I've been looking at
like the eyes that y'all, the eyes that watch y'all, right?
Dude, I'm blushing.
But I think like it's like stupid. Like 100% of 5, right, is not as good as like 5% of like a billion, right? Like we could bring all of the eyes together and be like, yo, if every podcast I shouted out another South Asian podcast, which I'm down to do, right? Why wouldn't I? Right? Like, why wouldn't I? Like, if I could bring more eyes to that, like, make the space bigger, right? I had Ani up from obviously Kolkata, right? And he talks about like, you think that, you know how many chai fucking brands there are now? And he's like, bro, we knew that when we came out the gate. We knew that there was going to be a bunch more. But he's just like, I don't look at it as like, oh, competition.
It grows the category.
It grows the category.
People that are likely to drink chai are now like going to see these like older brands that have been established there, right? It's a win for everyone. The market's not, it's not defined yet.
Think about it. Hip hop has grown so hard, right? Where your random like SoundCloud rapper that we've never heard of is probably getting a good check. Right? Like I look at that and like you track but you track like Twitch streaming at all?
Not really.
Like
no.
So like that space is a space
that, like, the
category has gotten so big that bro, my barber who streamed probably was able to pull in like 500-600 a month, and that was like.
Wait, does your barber stream him like giving haircut?
No. He just
that's actually
like, streams
kind of
like video
fire
games. That'd be fire. That'd be fire.
Interview someone as they're like getting their haircut.
That'd be fire. Like if somebody just
like
constant
really
stream.
Vulnerable place too.
I'm like if y'all like it's like Chad, if you donate $50, we'll tell a really juicy story.
No, like
I'll screw his haircut up.
Give me 150, I'll shave his head off.
If we get to 500 streamers, bro, I'll give him the reverse mohawk.
Yo, we might have to build that out. Build that out with somebody South Asian. I'm so dead ass. Like every time I hear a good idea, I'm like, yo, somebody, because I think that's the other part, right? Like I think like you're honestly like a really good person, Chirag, to facilitate that, right? I know you're doing brand consulting and things like that, but somebody like you can like really pick out a platform or a person and be like, let me help you build this out. Right? Like, of course, for your like own benefit, but also like, yo, like you have like because I look at South Asian artists like a lot like that. I'm like, yo, a lot of us are fire, but we don't have like the marketing behind it. Like, because we're only one person, right? When you talk about like, when you're talking about like, I'm talking about my goal for this platform, I don't envision as just one person, right? I envision like, I'm gonna need people, right? I'm gonna need people, I'm gonna need relationships, I'm gonna need spaces, right?
Big shout out to everyone backstage right now. Right?
Yo, absolutely. Yo, shout out to like everybody who makes it happen behind the scenes for every big platform, right? Because it takes an army to do this. Like us, like, and that's where, again, back to the conversation about like trying to do things individually, that's where it is the biggest disservice. Like I look at somebody like P and Anik, like they should have teams around them because what they could be. Right? Like, but everyone's like too hyper focused on like, what can I build for myself? Right? Like I know you don't, like you obviously don't do that like Chirag, right? Because like obviously you're building your thing, but like I know that you're like consulting other platforms. Like you don't really have to, bro. Like you have like a full-time like other gig, right? But I think like those are the things that end up being so critical. Because like the business has to also be good. right? Like it can't just be all personalities and like we all want to be on camera. And like that's where I think we're at. Like everybody wants to be seen. Everybody wants to be like, my Instagram is popping. And that's why you're like not in it for the right reasons.
I know. There's a quote that I read that was like, you can't think of yourself as more than or less than anyone. And it's like once you really adopt that, then you're so open to working with others because you realize everyone can eat. And why wouldn't you want the South Asian community to get even bigger? And like the more representation you see, the more like it normalizes our experiences growing up, the more like we're able to have a seat at bigger tables, to have an influence on how like we want to be represented. Like it's so nice to see like in like big productions like shows like Never Have I Ever, where it's like an actual like brown kid going through like normal brown
and
kid
it's a
things.
cast
And it's a cast backed by like
you physically
like,
see
all
the
these,
table
like,
getting
crazy
bigger.
things.
Yeah,
it's like,
and I think like a big part of that, I think for especially like the age group that we're in, right, is I think it comes down to like the pure obsession with like the social media aspect of it. Like to like Ani had a great quote, right? Like most people want to look successful before they are successful. He was obviously talking in terms of success, but I think most people want to look like they're relevant, rather than be relevant. Like again, like Chirag, like you don't have like like obviously you have like a following, right? But you don't have the biggest following, but to how relevant you are for this culture is important, right? And I look at like that's like something that people aren't willing to like really accept, right? Like let's just assume that like this podcast is like semi like relevant, right? Like people would say because like I'm in front of the camera, like oh like relevant, right? Sure. But you don't think that like my executive producer Saz is just as relevant? But you would know like her Instagram private, she'd be chilling, right? But
yo,
like,
word, I was so surprised to find. I was like, yo, I've never like it's been a while since I've come across someone with a private Instagram.
But because to her,
we
it's
just
like
blow your Instagram. Because everyone's just gonna go like following that,
bro. But because to her, it's like not about like oh, I need to be seen as like the person for this, right? It's like about really building this.
On that point, what's your what's your goal, right? What's the intention? Obviously, I mean, everyone would love more followers, more intent, and like always looking for more brand deals and stuff, and all that stuff is fun and cool, right? But at the end of the day, the following doesn't matter as much as it's like what's my core or what's my key performance indicator, my KPI, right? I work with a lot of South Asian brands who don't have that answer down, right? So we're like talking, like, what are you going for? And they'll be like, oh, we're just trying to grow, we're trying to get sales, I'm like, nah, you're trying to do everything, bro. Like large corporations spend millions of dollars trying to do that and they can't do it, right? So it's like, what's that one thing that matters the most, that one metric that you measure? And like for me, like for example, it's like the amount of talks I book, right? To me, it's like no matter everything I do, I was working with someone who she had a following of like 10,000 on one platform, 100,000 on another, right? We started working and she goes, I want to figure out what to focus on more. She's like, I'm going to focus on the one that has 100,000, right? And we go, okay, so your core performance indicator is like followers, right? I was like, let's take a moment. Are you just like a entertainment brand or something? She was like, no. I was like, what are you doing? She's like, I'm selling something. So she had an e-commerce store, right? So I was like, then your your key performance indicator is sales, right? The number of money you're making, or the amount of money, sorry. So we started looking at her website and we realized that the platform that had 10,000 followers, 90% of her sales were coming from that platform, not from the one with 100,000. But because she wasn't looking at the right key performance indicator, like what was the real thing that mattered to her? She was about to miss this opportunity and instead focus on like followers instead, right? For me, it's talks. For you, I'm not sure what, like maybe it's brand deals or whatever it is for you, right? Actually, what is it for you? Like, what do you, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot right now, right? Like it's, people assume influencers just want to get more followers, right?
I mean, like obviously followers is a nice thing, but it also like comes down to who is following me.
Quality of followers.
Quality of followers definitely matters because when brands want to work with you, it's no longer just how many followers do you have, it's who is following you. It's like you could be a girl with like 70% male followers. Sephora's gonna be like, okay, like I'm trying to sell like a makeup product.
They just here for some ass. They're just like, we don't give a fuck about the makeup.
How is that gonna result into sales? And that's the biggest thing that is like changing around the influencing game because brands are now starting to realize the importance of that. So that's why it's like they're shifting a lot to micro influencers, which is amazing because like people like micro influencers are also viewed as more credible versus like someone with like 100K.
Why do you think so?
Because it's kind of like that like celebrity effect. Like everyone knows a celebrity is being paid X amount of money to endorse this product, and it's like, okay, you got a paycheck for it, but how can I trust that this is actually a good product? Like but versus a micro influencer is like, yo, I've been using this for like 5 years, great, always go back to it, it's only like $10, like you guys should check it out. And it's like, okay, like you know what, she sounds credible, she has credibility, she's like actually like someone who looks like me, she has like like, yeah.
Well, I think you hit it right on a cool dot, right? That idea that she looks like me or she does things I do, right?
Yeah.
This idea that people, we can follow you because I just think you're cool, right? And you're
Yeah.
inspiring in some way, right? Or I can follow you because I think you're doing cool things. Or I can follow you because you remind me of a version of myself that I want to be.
Yeah.
Right. And I think those are when you get the core followers. That's when it really means the world. Like if I look at your content, I'm like, oh, I want to be like her.
Yeah.
Right. And so then it means a lot more when I'm like, oh, well, every video she uses the same Tumblr, right? Or every video she has, like when she goes to the gym, she has this like clothing brand that she uses, right? And so like it takes away that decision-making process instead of me having to look at a million different options. You're like, well, if she reminds me of the type of person I want to be and she likes XYZ item, ergo, to make it easier for me, let me also buy that product, right? It's tried and tested.
Yeah.
And I think coming back all the way to the beginning to your whole point, right? It starts off always like that, right? For creators. And then creators start realizing, oh shoot, I can actually get people to make movement and like buy things. And then they end up, unfortunately, like in that sort of passion of like trying to run towards something, can end up doing brand deals where it's like, well, now I'm like, okay, well, I bought that watch you were telling me about because I thought it was going to be like make me like you.
Yeah.
Problem is, you never wear that watch in any of your videos now, and like, oh shoot, what's going on there? I don't trust you as much, and you grow bigger and bigger, but then that trust erodes.
And you see that like in your views too, like
Bang.
as like someone who does like do sponsored things, it's like I can't help but notice that if I'm just like in the early days when I would just put out like a basic like, hey guys, like check out this product, whatever kind of TikTok, the engagement was so much lower than like if I sat down and I was like telling them an intense story or like, sharing something that was like way more authentic. And you start to gauge things like that. So going back to your questions, like what are my KPIs? My KPIs are like how much engagement I'm actually getting from the kind of audience I want to be attracting. Not just because you can get a lot of engagement, but it's not the right kind of engagement.
Yeah.
And like as a brown girl, you also learn that very quickly. And this is not like in like a arrogant kind of way, but when you're a conventionally attractive woman, if you are not very intentional with what you're putting out there, you will attract anyone and everyone. And like that's the caveat. Even when you are intentional, like there's always that kind of crowd there. But the fulfillment and like the purpose you feel when you see the engagement you want to see, it's like over the moon. It's like when I finally started seeing,
because then it really hit. Because then you know
like,
it really hit.
Now what I'm doing matters.
Yeah, because it's like exactly what I was trying to do. Yeah, exactly what I was trying to do is exactly what I did. Right. Like I think like that KPI is from like a tangible something to measure. Absolutely.
What's yours? Put you on the spot right now,
Yo.
By the way, I charged for this entire consultation, right?
I was gonna ask. I was like, yo, this is honestly like however much I paid for the studio is probably the cheapest I was gonna get Chirag to do this for me.
Yeah,
yo, y'all didn't see this episode might not even come out.
You started, it was like, what are we doing on social media? I was like, damn, yo, okay, we're jumping right in.
After this, I was gonna get him to do a full in-depth overview of my social media. Okay, what am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
Where should we go with this?
Yeah. Also, hold on, real quick. I will also share, right? Come from a big point of privilege, right?
Yeah.
South Asian, college-educated man, right? Full family and everything, right? Working in tech. You throw a rock, there's like 8 of us right out there, right? So there are certain things, right? Certain pieces of advice that I give or feedback that I give that works for me and may not work for others, right?
Yeah.
Keep that in mind.
Sure.
That being said, however, to hear the things that you two are saying means the world.
Yeah.
Right?
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
My KPI, my KPI is like so like this is just me as a person. My KPI is respect. Like I think
how you measure respect though.
Like,
okay, let me give you an example.
It's respect from people. Like I don't count them, right?
Yeah.
But seeing certain people that I respect, like DM me saying, yo,
but you need to count them. You need to count them though.
I do that.
But you say like, oh, your KPI, right? When you see people engage, right? Whatever engagement metric you're looking at, right? It gives you an indication of what's working and what's not.
Yeah.
There was, I forget the name of the shoe store or shoe company, but they were like, the founder, right? They spent all this time doing a bunch of stuff, right? They're running out of money and they're like struggling a bit. And so he goes to like some marathon. I think it was either Boston or New York marathon. And he sits there and he goes, these are my target audience. And he looks and counts the number of people in the marathon that year that are wearing his shoes, right? And he goes, yo, only like 2 people are wearing this.
Yeah.
And so that entire was like for 1 year, our KPI, the thing we're going to measure, the thing we're going to make all our decisions based on is I want to increase the number of people that are wearing the shoes in the marathon. And what that does is more importantly, right, is like when you can measure it, it changes the type of decisions you make. Because now when engineering's sitting there and going, well, we can use this material or this material, which one are the ones that are going to run in the marathon better? We can do this marketing or this marketing, which is the one that the people in the marathon are going to like better. Same thing with you is like, and plus it makes it so much easier for your team. Yeah. Dude, I can only imagine the amount of frustration and like stuff that happens behind the scenes. Obviously with something like putting something as complex as this together. Yeah. But when you're all aligned on one thing, you're autonomous, right? You don't have to ask like, hey, should I be doing this or this? It's like, what's going to drive us closer to that KPI that we care about? And if it's respect, then honestly, then it's the DMs. It's the DMs or like, I know early on, like I had a couple like speakers that I really looked up to. And like anytime one of them followed me on TikTok or something, I screenshotted that and I saved that in a folder.
But see, like that's what I mean.
And I saw like, which content made them follow. And I made more content like that.
Yeah, I think like what you're describing is exactly it. And I think like, I actually do feel inspired based off of what you're saying to measure that maybe somewhat tangibly. Cause I think I like do it like unintentionally. Like every time like somebody I respect follows me or somebody I really respect DMs me and is like, yo, keep building, right? Yeah. Like I screenshot it and like send it to like my friends and be like, yo, guess who just lit up, right?
Would you ask them like what video they saw?
They've like usually mentioned it or like so I can time it out, right?
You,
like
right?
You're like I get it, like because I can tell that you're probably like a lot more like analytical and tactical. Like I think I'm just and it's probably a disservice for myself, right? Is to go just purely off the strength, right? Like I just always assume that like the way that I want to like put something out or like what's authentic to me is going to reach those people, right? Like I think that like it is kind of tactical, but it's also kind of not, right?
I see that so much with like South Asian brands that start here, right? And the newer, like the new ones that we've had this whole boom, like we have this almost renaissance of South Asian culture here, in New York, right? Not sure out in Miami right now, right? But I know Toronto, right? Oh, music.
It's just a renaissance of South Asian culture. That's why I keep looking at it as so much opportunity. I'm like, this is like we building, right?
80% of my high school was brown kids.
Yeah.
I swear, like, any other race is the minority.
Yeah. But it's like we have this, we see all these South Asian businesses coming up, right? And like, I was working with one the other day and he goes like, oh yeah, like, I was like, so what do you want to stand for, right? Like your brand, I think Jeff Bezos said this, right? Where he was like, oh, your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room, right? Don't direct quote that, right? And I was like, so when people are out of the room, what do you want? Like when I'm sitting there with a bunch of my friends and they're asking me about brands I'm working with, what do you want me to tell them about your clothing brand, right? He's like, oh, I want you to tell them like X, Y. And he listed out all these, and obviously there are always these aspirational things. Oh, like culture, global, blah, 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 right? And I was like, cool. And then we go on their website and none of those words are mentioned, right? And I was like, the most basic version of marketing is just figuring
You're really a brand guy. Because what you're describing is just knowing your brand. Well,
because
right?
Like, we assume that people, okay, look, I put 1 million, I know, like I joke about it, but I know what I'm doing every day, right? And I know what it means. But then when people come to me and say, hey, Chirag, like I actually can't really tell what you're doing, that actually makes me a little sad because I'm like, I'm failing at building my brand effectively, right? The most basic exercise I'll walk people through is like your brand is what you are, right? And your marketing is how you tell me that. For your brand, simple exercise, pick 5 words that you really want people to always associate. When they're out of the room, when you're out of the room and they're talking about you, right? You want 5 words that they'll use about you. Your marketing is just finding unique ways to remind them. For example, Heinz, right? Heinz really loves the words slow and red. Slow ketchup means that it's high quality ketchup. Red, they have a very specific shade of red that they want. So a lot of their unique marketing efforts are just reminding people of those 2 words. They came out with a website that took 57 minutes to load, a red website. That was all red, right? Red, slow. They had this like thing where they came out with a big puzzle that of like 570 pieces or something, all red. A red puzzle that takes you time. So it's slow, right? And same thing with your stuff, right? Like when I'm speaking to you all, I'm saying like I'm being very deliberate about certain words that I'm saying. I'm saying things like, oh, like when I go and speak, or when I consult. Oh, when I was working with someone the other day.
Your brand.
Because those are words that like your audience, they'll forget 90% of what we've said. Yeah. But if I keep giving you the words that I want you to use about me, you will eventually use them, right? Yeah. Because like when people ask, oh, how is Chirag? You'd be like, oh yeah, he speaks and he does, like he consults people, blah, blah, blah. Those words didn't come out of thin air. I was deliberate about giving them to you, right? And the same thing with you is like, what words? Someone asked me what it was like on this podcast. What are the words you want me to use? And like being deliberate, using those words, saying those words. Put them on your website. Put them on your Instagram,
like psychology and marketing.
I think all in one.
It's all in one.
Guys, I think we're wrapping up, but I end every episode by asking a very direct question. I'm just going to give us some context. I ask everybody who comes up here, whatever you guys feel comfortable sharing, I ask you guys to call your shot, something that you, personal or business, will make happen in the next 3 to 5 years, like a goal, something you're going to, and I always look at it as like, y'all going to make it happen, right? Calling your shot means like you're putting it out there, but also like getting it, right? So ask you guys, call your shot, right?
What's the time frame? 3 to 5 years?
3 to 5 years.
Whatever, yeah.
Okay, well, in the next 3 to 5 years, I hope to be I plan to be
Yeah.
a full-time content creator, influencer, and signed to a top agency, a modeling agency. And at the same time, I'm also actively working to, and this is the part that I'm still planning, to figure out how to give back to the South Asian community. But I also want to find a way to also actively be working with the youth to figure out how to make sure that they're getting the education and the information they need on mental health and their well-being overall in a much grander scale than that's available to kids nowadays.
Chirag?
5 years from now, I want to sell out a stadium for one of my talks. I want to be the biggest marketing and branding speaker out there in 5 years.
I'm fucking with it.
I hope to be at that show.
We will be at if that happens. When it happens,
VIP,
we will be
and we'll have green Skittles and everything on your rider.
Oh, when it happens, we will be there. Nah, I fuck with that a lot. Ree. Y'all, happy holidays. Thank y'all for listening. We will catch y'all before the new year. Peace.
Ha ha, baby. No, fuck.
Yo, that was a bad. I'm gonna make guests start doing that after Chirag. It's like, yo, come say the drop. Yo, retry it.
Absolutely not.
Retry it.
I'm not.
Yo, next time. Yo, peace. That's what it is.
Yo.
Pleasure, guys. Pleasure.